Hi, I want to talk a bit about the Wim Hof Method and the science behind it, right? And my contention here is that science is not as important as you probably think it is, and definitely not in the way that you think it is, right? Because I mean, what I see is, to start out, or before you start out, really, when you're trying to figure out, is this guy for real? Is it worth it for me to try? Okay, that's totally valid. I've been there. It makes perfect sense, right? There's a lot of people out there saying a lot of different things, and it's a really good way to sort of separate Wim from the masses, right? And also if you have a specific condition, some kind of I don't know, it can be anything, Parkinson's, depression, whatever it is. I think it makes a lot of sense to look a bit more deeply and really say, will this work for me? So no arguments there. But beyond that, I think it's really can take us down the wrong path, right? Because what ends up happening for a lot of people is we get this sort of insistence on measuring everything, right? So we gotta know, how long do I have to be in the shower? What temperature does the water have to be? How many rounds do I have to do? How many times a day? How long do I have to hold my breath? All this stuff, and there's this, I don't know, it's this desire to make it sort of into a formula or a system, almost as though it were, I don't know, like a pill, right? If I just do this, this, and this, then everything's going to be okay. But the method doesn't work that way, right? I mean, it's just it operates on fundamentally different principles, right? And even though Wim in the past few years has started saying these types of things and giving us these formulas, if you look at the way he got there, you look at his personal history and the way this whole method developed, it's obvious that there was nothing even remotely close to that. I mean, it was the exact opposite. What Wim had for his entire life, maybe, I mean, decades of doing this, is he had doctors and researchers telling him he was crazy and that he was going to die. And he did what he did anyway, right? So there's this strange sort of 180 that's happened within the Wim Hof method. And I mean, partly I think it's understandable because, he wants the method to be accessible. He wants to sort of lower the what's that called, the barrier of entry, right? And I understand that. I mean, that makes sense. And a lot of other people, they want to believe that I don't know, that you can change yourself easily, right? You can get these great effects. You can become a superhuman with 2-minute cold showers. And again, that's understandable, but I think it's wrong, right? You can get some benefits, yes, but you're not going to get the full benefits, and you're not going to be anywhere near where Wim is just doing 2-minute cold showers, right? But I think sort of deeper than this, really, there's this desire for the world to be rational and logical, right? We want to trust in something. We want to trust in science and believe that, if there's scientific proof, if there's been studies that are done, then everything's okay. And I'm sorry, but that's wrong, right? That's, I mean, there's vast areas of knowledge, very important knowledge, that science is just has nothing to say there. I mean, the origin of matter, for example, the origin of life. There is no credible scientific theory. There's no consensus there whatsoever. Consciousness. What is consciousness? No one knows. fMRI scans are not good enough to tell us what consciousness is. There's a lot of interesting ideas floating around, but no one knows. So this idea that I will only do things that are scientifically proven, to me seems untenable. We'll just say that. But still, we see this sort of almost a faith, really, and I think, I mean, to me, it seems like science sometimes replaces God, right? And scientists replace priests. It's this same sort of desire to just put our trust and our faith in something external that's going to solve all of our problems. And it's, if you look just even minimally into the details of how science is done and sort of where its shortcomings are, it's not a very good idea, right? So anyway, I mean, it's not a surprise that the science around the Wim Hof method is less than perfect, right? I mean, the science around a lot of things is less than perfect. But I think it's important to point out because a lot of people, they seem to see, okay, Wim Hof Method, scientifically proven, so I don't know, it works for everything, right? And that's not true. I mean, the studies that have been done, there have been really interesting studies that have been done, some interesting results, but it's not enough to put the Wim Hof Method at the status of, I don't know, say a medical treatment, right? Been just a handful of studies, mostly have been done on Wim or just a few other participants, nothing like the hundreds or thousands of people that would be necessary to get this treatment approved as, like, you know, an FDA approved treatment for whatever it is. And so you know, that's important to remember, but I think what's even more important to remember is that this whole sort of desire to put it in this medical formula is misguided, right? And I'm going to go through the reasons here. So, talking about, first of all, why it's wrong to think of the Wim Hof Method as a sort of equivalent to any other sort of medical treatment. Is Midlife Crisis channel put out a pretty good video on this. This guy's a doctor, he's a research scientist, and he goes through pretty good reasons explaining why there are shortcomings in the science behind the Wim Hof Method. And I think it's you know, it's a good video to watch, and it's an interesting video to watch, partly because this guy, I think his name is Rohan, he's sort of like a poster boy for this sort of scientist as priest model, right? He's eloquent, he's concise, he has a very sort of direct and, well, sometimes sort of condescending tone, just sort of laying out the facts, you know. This is the way it is, ba ba ba, and it creates, again, this sort of illusion that there is somewhere this sort of base of rationality and logic that we can all trust in, right? But I think something that's probably the most interesting part of this video that is something that isn't actually in the video, something he neglects to mention. What he neglects to mention is that he actually practices the Wim Hof Method, right? So he lays out all the reasons why the Wim Hof Method might not be as good as we think it is. It might not be capable of achieving all of the sort of magical benefits that we think it can. At least there's no hard scientific evidence proving that it can. But what he doesn't say is that he's been practicing the Wim Hof Method for quite a while now. And so what was really interesting here is this video that he put up. It was, I don't know, it was like 10 months ago or something. And shortly after he put it up, there was a response video put up by Jesse Coomer, who's a Wim Hof Method teacher. And I don't know, I was with him in Poland and met him. And anyway, he's a nice guy too. These are all nice people. I'm not trying to pick fights with anyone. But what was really interesting is first, Midlife Crisis puts up this video saying Wim Hof Method science isn't maybe as trustworthy as you think it is. Jesse Coomer said, yeah, no argument there. People come in with all kinds of crazy ideas thinking it's going to cure everything, and that's not the way it works. But then Rohan's response to Jesse's video was just a written response, was really interesting. I'm gonna read you a little part of that. So what he says is, there's more to any given philosophy or way of life than science, and I hope I conveyed that, which I don't think he did in the video at all, but anyway, I hope I conveyed that. I wasn't trying to belittle the other very considerable benefits that come from the Wim Hof Method, but just sought to concentrate on the science, as I felt that was my area of expertise. I have practiced the technique for a while, but there are people far more qualified to talk about those wider and less quantifiable variables than me, right? That's really important. You know, this is a guy who's dedicating his life to scientific research, to medical treatment, and he's saying, look, there's a whole nother realm out there of really important stuff that I'm not qualified to deal with. You know, it's beyond science, it's beyond medical science, and it's so important that he's actually doing the method, right? So that's very important to keep in mind. And I also want to touch on sort of his main critique of the science behind the Wim Hof Method, which is that you can't do double-blind studies on the Wim Hof Method. Now, double-blind study is a study in which neither the participants nor the researchers know who's receiving the treatment, right? And the idea is to eliminate the placebo effect. It's sort of the gold standard in medical research, and it's, you know, it's considered necessary before any kind of medicine goes on to market. Obviously, you can't do that in the Wim Hof Method because the people who have been practicing the Wim Hof method know that they're doing it, and the researchers see them doing the breath work, see them getting in cold water before any kind of tests are being done. So, the gold standard in medical science is impossible to implement with the Wim Hof method. But for me, that's not a problem, right? It's just an indication that the real strength of the Wim Hof method lies outside of the medical model, right? The strength of the Wim Hof method is actually in what medical science would call the placebo effect, right? It's our body's and our mind's ability to heal ourselves, right? So the fact that you can't eliminate the placebo effect isn't a surprise. That's exactly where the essence of the method lies, right? So the placebo effect is really interesting, partly because it has been studied so little, right? And there's an obvious profit motives there, right? The big pharmaceutical companies that fund the vast majority of research in the world don't have any interest in exploring how we can heal ourselves without taking pharmaceuticals, right? But some research has been done, and there's some really sort of intuitive results, which are, it's kind of funny, but, a white pill has less placebo effect than a colored pill, for example, or one pill has less than multiple pills. If you put a little logo or letter on the pill, it's going to be more effective. If you get a placebo injection, that's going to be more effective than pills. If you get a placebo surgery, that's going to be the most effective at all. Right, so there's a really famous study done on knee surgery where they had, this specific knee surgery was done, and then the placebo surgery was done. And it actually turned out that the placebo surgery was more effective than the real surgery. I mean, it's crazy stuff. To me, the most interesting part of the placebo effect is that it seems to work in some cases, at least, even if you know that you're getting a placebo. So people know they're getting sugar pills, but they still work as though they weren't sugar pills. It's wild. So here's a piece of evidence to keep in mind, right? I mean, it's very controversial. There have been a few studies done trying to assess medicine as a whole, right? How effective is pharmacology, right? For psychiatric stuff and for physical medication, right? And the numbers vary for obvious reasons. I mean, there's a lot of conflicting interest here, but generally it's somewhere around 40%. If you take all the medications that are approved by the FDA, at least in the US, and you look at how effective they are, they're going to have cumulatively somewhere around a 40% effective rate. And there are some medicines that are much more effective, some medicines that are less, right? But the average, equaling it all out, is around 40%. And the placebo effect, somewhere around 20%. Some will say 18, some will say 22, whatever, somewhere around 20%. So what that means is that the evidence suggests, at least, that somewhere around half of the effectiveness of any drug you might take in your life is probably due to your belief that it's going to work. Right? It's due to your own body and your own mind's ability to heal itself. That's incredible, right? That's incredible. So again, I know this is controversial, but I think that medical science really is not. It's not as trustworthy as we'd like to think it is, right? I mean, so this is really where I differ from the midlife crisis treatment. I'm saying, science in general has a lot of gaps in its knowledge. Wim Hof method hasn't been proven to the standards that we would like for medical science, but there's good reasons for that. And medical science in general, it really isn't as trustworthy as we'd like to think it is, right? So I'm going to give you a few examples here. I'm going to try and run through them sort of quickly so this video doesn't get too long. First, just there's huge areas in medical science that haven't been studied, right? For lack of interest, lack of funding. That can be for all kinds of reasons, including political and sort of ideological reasons. But I mean, just a quick example, right? There's, like I said, very, very little evidence has been done on the body's ability to heal itself. But I mean, in much more sort of mundane and less obvious aspects as well. So just quick example, the entire human genome was mapped before there was a good working anatomical model of the clitoris, right? That's incredible, mind-blowing. But again, it comes down to funding and interest. So just because something hasn't been studied doesn't mean it isn't important. It doesn't mean it isn't vital to our health and well-being, but just social factors can be very powerful here. Even when medical science is good at describing things, it's not generally very good at predicting things, right? So again, another sort of strange sexist example. women were not allowed to run Olympic marathons until 1984, right? And this is because there was scientific evidence that they would not be capable of doing it. They would get sick, they would die. Some people believe their ovaries were going to fall out. I mean, literally until 1984. That's the year I was born. It's insane, but it's true. If you don't believe me, look it up. And this isn't just a thing with women, right? I think it's a basic fundamental shortcoming of the scientific methods used in medical research, right? It's good at describing things after the fact, generally, but bad at predicting what our capabilities are, which is obviously very important when you're talking about the Wim Hof Method, where that's exactly what we're trying to do is push ourselves and grow in ways that maybe science can't understand yet, right? So I mean, you can see that with the 4-minute mile, where that was considered humanly impossible, free diving below 100 meters. I mean, many times scientific researchers, people like the guy from the midlife crisis, or, I don't want to pick on him, very solemn, well-spoken, highly educated people have dedicated their lives to understanding the inner workings of the human body, have told us that this is impossible, and then people went out and did it anyway, and they're like, oh, okay, I guess we have to figure out how it is possible. So they've been doing that. Medical science plays catch up a lot of the time. And I mean, then beyond that, there's some really sort of important practical shortcomings, which is that even when studies have been done, even when good studies have been done, that research is often not released, right? And this is something that people in medical fields are very well aware of. It's called publishing bias, where, I mean, basically, studies that give positive results, saying that a given medical treatment might work, are 2 times more likely to be published than one saying that they don't work, right? And again, we come back to funding here and sort of the interests of pharmaceuticals. But it's not just, I don't know, it's not just sort of an abstract academic problem, right? I mean, there's a famous case with antiarrhythmic heart medicine where there had been studies done showing that it actually killed people, but those studies weren't published. And then a few more studies were done showing that, hey, maybe it's actually pretty good. The medicine went to market, and it killed 100,000 people in the US before people realized what was going on. It was taken off market, and there's a whole sort of scandal around this, right? Again, with antidepressants, there was one famous antidepressant, I forget what it was called, but anyway, there was 38 studies done showing that it probably was pretty effective. 36 studies were done showing that it probably wasn't very effective. And I mean, just think about that for a second. If medical science is as pristine and foolproof as we'd like to believe it is, how is it possible that 38 studies can say something works and 36 studies can say that it doesn't work? How is that possible? It shouldn't be possible, but it is possible, and it happens all the time. But then this is the really sort of insidious part. Of those 38 studies showing that it worked, 37 were published. And of the 36 studies saying that it wasn't going to work, only 3 were published. So then when it went to the FDA and they saw 37 versus 3, they said, okay, looks pretty good. We'll give it a go. And it went to market again. And it was a long time before people realized that it wasn't very effective at all. Right? So again, okay, we'll say one more thing, right? So even when studies have been done, even when the results are well known by medical doctors, they aren't always acted upon, right? And again, we're coming back to conflict of interest here, because doctors often get 10, 15, 100 times more money for prescribing a certain treatment rather than others, right? They have this sort of uncomfortable and obscure relationship with the pharmaceutical companies, and when there have been efforts to try and bring this to light, right? The same way that lawyers have to declare conflicting interests, or journalists, or pretty much anyone in the public sphere, politicians, whatever, we have to declare where our money comes from and where our interests lie in economic terms. But doctors don't have to do that. And there have been attempts to allow doctors to do that voluntarily, but even that, which seems, innocuous and, so incredibly logical, it got met with huge backlash from the medical community, from the pharmaceutical companies. And there's a doctor who's started a campaign in the U.S. called it's called Who's Your Doctor, right? And she just wanted to put a list out there so where doctors could put their own information voluntarily and say, if I give you a knee surgery, I will get X amount of money, but if I give you this this medicine, I'll get 100 times less. Just put it out there so people would have that information going in to see their doctor and know where their funding's coming from, right? And I mean, this doctor literally got death threats from other doctors saying, this is insane, this is crazy, what are you doing? I spent my life, slaving away in medical school, and now you want to take all my money away from me, blah, blah, blah. It's crazy. I mean, you should look up the sort of comments she was getting from these supposedly medical professionals, right? I mean, crazy stuff. Okay, so just to sort of bring this to a close, it's not as rational as you probably think to trust in medical science. And it's not actually a very big deal that the Wim Hof Method cannot be held to these standards. These standards, they're not as good as we would like them to be, right? And the Wim Hof Method really works in a completely different way, right? Where it's the most valuable really is helping us to explore our own limits in both body and mind, sort of without any kind of rubric, without any kind of system. I mean, we have the basic elements. Okay, we know how the breathing method works. We know that cold water exposure is gonna help us in some way. But that's really enough. Then it's up to you to start listening to your body and really seeing how far can you go with this. What are the benefits you can get from it, right? And so to sort of return to the idea of the placebo as a possible model for the way this could work. The obvious prerequisite is that you have to believe it's going to work, right? And so again, science can be useful here up to a certain point, just sort of allowing you to trust in the method, right? That's an important first step. And that will get us around, if the studies are right, somewhere around 20% effectiveness, right? That's the standard effectiveness for a placebo effect. But if we want to go beyond that, I think we have to look a bit more in how do we increase this belief, not in the magic of a method, but in our own agency, our own ability to heal ourselves, right? And I think one way of thinking about it is there's sort of 3 important points. One is you need a sort of a role model, right? You need a person like Wim, or an instructor, or a friend, someone who's done this before you, has had good results, and is willing to share that with you. It's really important. And again, from a sort of scientific perspective, that's basically irrelevant, right? That's just anecdotal evidence. 1 or 10 people having good benefits doesn't really mean anything in scientific terms, but on a personal level, it's fundamental, right? It's incredibly important. And so once you sort of have this person who's helping you, who's showing you the way by their example, then the most important thing while you're doing it is to be aware, right? To be, mindful. To engage with your body and with your mind while you're in the cold water, while you're doing the breath work, so that you can be learning about yourself while you're doing it, right? Again, this is not a passive process. This is an active process where you have to be discovering for yourself what you're capable of, right? So here the ability to sort of look within yourself and gain this awareness of these sort of internal processes, the autonomic nervous system and the visualization and there's a whole vast realm of ourselves to be discovered here, which are completely outside the realm of, or almost completely outside the realm of scientific study to this point, right? So for me, the actual practice is really best understood as a tool for self-discovery, right? And there's an obvious aspect of this, which is pushing yourself to to explore your limits and all that, and that's important. But I think even more important than that is really just learning about yourself and learning about how you function, and yes, learning how far you can push yourself and sort of what are the results there, right? And then the last aspect is once you've sort of had your mentor, your guide, you've been exploring on your own, I think it's really important to be able to share what you've learned with other people, right? And it might not be obvious why this is important, but I think if you push yourself to really to share what you've learned, it helps you to learn much more deeply, right? And it's I don't know. I mean, it's the reason why I'm making this video now. It's the reason why I'm studying to be a Wim Hof instructor. I think it's just sort of a natural outgrowth of believing in something deeply, right? If you really believe that this can work, you just have a natural desire to want to share it with people. And so I think these 3 things are probably a much more useful or I don't know. It's at least a psychologically richer and more interesting model to follow than this sort of medical model of I just have to follow these 10 steps and then everything's going to be okay. Right? So, well, I'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching. Obviously, if you want to, you can subscribe, leave a comment, like, share, all that good stuff. And yeah, thanks for watching.